All right, Soledad, was the president out of line?
I don't know if he was out of line, but I do think that the two people involved, Henry Louis Gates and the police officer, are actually very consistent in their statements. They agree. There's no contradiction in what they're talking about. Basically, they say the same thing. So whether it's stupid or not, whether the president's out of line, certainly not for me to say, but I think what you see is the police officer says he gets there and he doesn't know what's going on, so he starts to investigate. But then, at some point, he establishes, in fact, that the person he's dealing with is the homeowner. And he then, third part, gets angry because the person is belligerent. He describes him as being uncooperative, and so he arrests him. The two of them are very consistent in their stories. So now, whether you want to define that as stupid or not, I can't say. But I would say it's a pretty interesting thing to see the police officer really admitting that he was arrested because he was uncooperative in his own home.
Candy, your thoughts?
I think if you would ask the White House at this point, they would rather that particular sentence in what was a very lengthy response to the Gates case, they would take it out. Here's why. It is being seized upon as making a judgment about a case that many people feel will never really know what went on inside the house. And now Soledad is saying they have consistent stories, but nonetheless, even the mayor this morning said, well, we're trying to figure out exactly what happened. We know that the head of the police in Cambridge said that the department was deflated by hearing this. So it was not something that you hear a president say, making a judgment like that. It is not, and it certainly was pretty harsh. Now, if he went on to say, I don't know the facts of the case, and I'm a little biased because I'm a personal friend of Gates, so there was that, and then he went on to say the police acted stupidly, and has been seized upon by critics, saying he shouldn't have said it.
Did the president play into stereotypes, and was that an unfortunate choice that he made?
I'm not sure those are stereotypes. I think that it is indeed a fact that it's a touchstone for people of color, that their interactions with police often become hostile, that there is an expectation sometimes that you can be a black person and maybe this is not your home, that there may have been a different scenario if Professor Gates had been white. So I think what people have seized upon is that experience. I have heard in my reporting for Black in America, and now the second part we're doing, Black in America 2, consistent stories. Not always the house, sometimes whose car is this? Is this your BMW? Let me see your ID. Why are you in this neighborhood? Do you belong here? Are you the nanny of this kid?
Is a president cast in a different, however, position for the office he holds?
I can't answer that because I don't, I don't cover the president. And I'm sure, as Candy says, stupidly, just because of the fact everyone's talking about that word, probably if you're dealing with press for the president, you think, wouldn't it be better if people are talking about health care today? I can say
perhaps
that,
not as well, given the setback to the president.
Possibly so. But I can say that he addressed an issue that people of color feel very strongly about, that they have a different treatment by officers. And the fact that this white police officer is an expert in race relations and seems kind of baffled that the black guy would be angry with the white police officer in his house, I think that that's kind of an interesting element too. All of these are, again, in the police officer's own words, coming off the police report.
What do you find baffling from the perspective of the white police sergeant?
Well, he is an expert in racial profiling. So this is something that he has done and studied for 5 years.
Given the circumstances.
Well, I think he was basically following police procedure. What's going on? I'm getting a report. Right. He says he was surprised that the person he was dealing with was not grateful that he was there. I think here's a person, an officer, who's not necessarily thinking of what Professor Gates is seeing, which is a white police officer has come into my home and is trying to figure out.
With black officers with him.
This white police officer was by himself at first. He came in fact, one of the reasons that he was concerned, he said, was he was alone, he had no backup. So he didn't know what was going on. So he wanted to follow police procedure and make sure there was nothing happening. So, but he, as the guy who is the expert in racial profiling, he said, he was behaving irrationally, Professor Gates, and he said, I had the sense he should be grateful I was there. And I think he seemed, I would describe that as a little baffled that why is Professor Gates not grateful that I'm here to help him out? Professor Gates is clearly angry, furious, however you want to describe it.
Was he reacting on the basis of racial stereotypes?
Was Professor Gates?
Correct.
Again, I cannot possibly answer that question because I was not there. I will say I would understand why a black man would be angry in his own home.
Candy, your thoughts?
Well, what was interesting to me listening to the president is that he did talk about the things Soledad is talking about now. He said, listen, I don't know if this was racial profiling. What I do know is that racial profiling exists, that it does happen, and this is something we as a country need to look at and to try and correct. Again, I think his words, if he had not said that the police department acted stupidly after admitting he didn't know really what the facts were, I don't think this would be the cause for criticism.
We should point out that aboard Air Force One today, Press Secretary Robert Gibbs did try to, if I may use one of your expressions there in Washington, D.C., Candy, tried to walk back the president from where he took the administration. Let's see what Robert Gibbs had to say. Let me be clear. He, the President of the United States, was not calling the officers stupid. Cooler heads on all sides should have prevailed. That clearly, I think, substantiates your perspective on it, Candy. This is what what Sgt Crowley said today. These are his comments. Let's listen in.
He's the President of the United States, and I support the President to a point, I guess. I think it's disappointing that he waded into what should be a local issue.
It's interesting because both Professor Gates and Sgt Crowley initially said, that both the city and Harvard, the professor and the sergeant had resolved things and they were not going to move further.
But here's the thing. He said, it's a local issue. And I think the point is it's not a local issue. Racial profiling as an issue as a whole, whether or not it happened in this case, I do not know. But as an issue, racial profiling is a national issue. It's a major problem. I mean, that's what the president was pointing out in his press conference last night.
Well,
So
actually, what he did was, had he done that, that would have been one thing. Had he said, racial profiling is a national issue, but he went to the issue of the circumstances involving his friend. But
I think what the police officer is saying, hey, this is local, and I'm saying the reason people are reacting the way they are is that it's not a local issue. It's a national issue. It's a thing that any person of color can relate to. The fact that there's an interaction between a white police officer and a